welcome back. Dr. Kevin Kavanagh, founder of Health Watch USA. Dr. Kavanagh, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
It's not a surprise that, as most anything is these days, even the coronavirus becomes politicized, and people divide into camps sort of based on which political party they prefer.
Well, unfortunately, that appears to be happening, and it really is not something which is helpful. That makes it more likely the virus is going to win. It's kind of like arguing how we're going to fight the Nazis during World War II. We need to have a coherent national strategy. Virus does not care where it's at, doesn't care who you are, doesn't care why you're gathering. If you're close by someone, especially indoors, there will be a chance of spread. And we really do need to learn to respect this virus.
And you mentioned a national strategy. Do you think that's likely at this point?
I think at this point it is very unlikely. I mean, I hate to say that, but we keep hearing mixed messaging from our national government, our federal government. We're also hearing a lot of mixed messaging from the WHO. You know, initially they were very slow on the uptake on person-to-person spread, then on the use of masks. And now with the recent revelations about them being slow of recognizing that there is at least some aerosolization of this virus, and that imposes a grave risk. Another reason why people need to wear masks. So individuals hear this, they get confused, they don't know what to do, and it becomes a mess. And that's currently what we're seeing now in the United States. And you combine that with a lot of false information on the internet, some of which is being fanned by our adversaries, it puts us in a terrible position. And that's kind of what we're facing right now over the next few weeks.
This is one of those things that I have always felt that, yes, a lot of people, particularly researchers, said something like this is going to happen at some point. But it caught a lot of people off guard. We weren't necessarily as prepared for it as we should have been. And people were scrambling to catch up. And to me, that means, all right, we may hear something different on Wednesday than we heard on Monday, but that's to be expected because of the situation. On the other hand, there were people who said from the very first announcement, everything should have been set in stone and never changing.
Well, there's a little truth to both of those positions. Certainly, this is a new virus. As we've learned more about it, they've learned it's more contagious. It has deadlier effects on the human body. It affects every organ of the body. It needs to be respected. And because of that, advisements have increased. Now, some people have used that as an excuse to say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. We're going to go party at bars. You shouldn't be doing that. But from the standpoint of whether or not we were prepared as we should have been, I think the answer to that is no. I mean, we had MERS, we had SARS, we had Ebola. All of those were warning signs, and we didn't heed them. Even with Ebola, we knew we didn't have adequate PPE. There was an enactment called Crimson Contagion, which was performed last year, which was kind of a pandemic war game. And this showed severe disruptions and confusion in our response. Again, that wasn't heeded. And a book was even published this year, which outlined virus coming out of China and coming into the United States. And again, severe disruptions. So all of this was pretty much known that it was going to happen. We've just dodged so many bullets. We didn't know exactly the caliber that we were going to be hit with, but we knew it was coming, and we really had our guard down.
One of the headlines today, 239 experts with one big claim: the coronavirus is airborne. That's really not a major news, is it? I mean, isn't that what we kind of expected?
Well, yes, we've been talking about that on this show a lot. I mean, we've been, I think, very much ahead of the game on this show. When you talk about the two strains of the virus, the strains affecting the little spiky protein that a virus uses to attach, when you talk about the use of masks, when you talk about whether or not the virus is airborne, all of these things we've been discussing on the show. Even the problems that are arising now with the chronic COVID syndromes and the post-ICU disabilities from this, we've been talking about this for weeks. And of course, people feel I'm alarmist, but I'm just telling you the way it is. Now it's big news, but for a lot of the listeners, it's like, well, we talked about that 2 months ago. And so people knew this was coming. And I think one of the problems that the messaging had on really lethality and the problems with this virus is not articulating that people who recover really aren't necessarily recovered. They've survived. You're recovered when you're not going to the doctor anymore, when you're back to normal functioning. And if you're in the ICU, that's going to take a long time. And some people will have lasting problems. So respect this virus. The good news is that if you watch the news media and they put that map up of where the coronavirus is, the last one I saw had 3 green states only, and all the rest were red, meaning being eaten up by the virus. And the 3 green states were New Hampshire, Vermont, and Kentucky. So our governor is doing a good job. He's having good advisement. We need to follow it, but we also need to respect this virus, especially indoor settings, parties, gatherings. Really need to quit doing that. This virus hasn't changed. It's as much in Kentucky as what it was several weeks ago or even several months ago. We have not gone down. We've just plateaued it. So it can take off at any time here.
We had a text from a listener wanting to ask you about Dr. Vladimir Zelenko. And he says, ask him about the Dr. Zelenko protocol.
That I'm not familiar with. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll check on that and find out. I wanted to ask one more thing about some of the info that you sent me. It says, don't waste your money on copper. Is that still going around?
Yeah, it is. They're having copper masks, which doesn't make any sense. The idea with copper is that it will, if it's pure copper, some of the alloys aren't nearly as good. It does kill some of the bacteria and contagions, but when they measure that, they're looking at 2 hours. And that's where they get their data from. So that's the main problem. I mean, it takes you much shorter than 2 hours to breathe in the air from the mask to your mouth. I mean, you're seconds. That's going to be a waste of money. And the other big thing that we're seeing on ads is the masks that have the little plastic valves on. Those are not good for this epidemic. That allows you to contaminate everything. So do not wear those. In California, I believe they're not within the mandates to wear a mask. If you wear a mask, that's not counted. So you need to be careful of that. Hand sanitizers, remember they're flammable. There are a very few products out that have methanol in them. Don't buy methanol containing hand sanitizers because methanol is a poison. FDA has come out and said don't use them. They're dangerous. So be sure to check what's in there. Isopropyl alcohol or ethanol is best. Ethanol is like alcohol. If you buy a 70% hand sanitizer, that's same as getting something that's 140% proof. But don't drink it because it's got a lot of other additives in it that probably is not good to have. So at any rate, that's what you need to do.
All right. Tell us that website once again.
healthwatchusa.org. And we do have a conference coming on next week at healthconference.org. Would really appreciate you coming and looking at what information we have on there.
Dr. Kevin Kavanagh, thanks as always. We'll talk to you again Wednesday.
All right. Thank you, sir.